The foldable iPhone Ultra release date rumor war is officially backhand this time. It's not just random speculation. We're seeing two very different narratives from two sources that both claim to have supply chain visibility. One side says Apple's first foldable iPhone won't be ready to launch with the iPhone 18 Pro series in September. The other side says a September launch is still on schedule and there's no problem delivering on time. So what's the real story behind the iPhone Ultra launch date, the production timeline, and the potential delay fears? And more importantly, if you're planning to buy Apple's first foldable iPhone, should you actually expect it this September? Or should you prepare for a later release? Let's unpack the latest leak, why it directly contradicts a major Apple analyst, and what the most realistic outcome could be for Apple's biggest iPhone cycle in years. Earlier this week, analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, one of the most widely cited names in Apple, leaks and forecasts poured cold water on the idea of a clean, normal September launch for the foldable iPhone Ultra. According to Kuo, Apple may not release the iPhone Ultra alongside the iPhone 18 Pro and iPhone 18 Pro Max. Instead, he suggested the foldable could arrive later in the year because of supply issues and production complexity. And he pointed to a very specific historical example that Apple fans remember well: the iPhone X in 2017. The iPhone X was unveiled at Apple's September event, but its actual availability slipped compared to the rest of the lineup because Apple couldn't manufacture enough units. Early on, Kuo's implication was clear: Apple's foldable iPhone could follow the exact same playbook announced in September, but ship later. Kuo's reasoning comes down to one word: yield. Foldables are inherently harder to mass-produce than standard smartphones. You've got flexible old panels, new hinge mechanisms, tighter internal layouts, more fragile materials, and a higher chance of components failing quality control, even if Apple designs it perfectly. Mass manufacturing at scale is a different battle entirely, Kuo claimed. Apple might have only 0.5 to 1 million foldable iPhone Ultra units ready to ship in Q3 2026. For most companies, that might sound like a lot. For Apple, it's tiny dot. To put that into perspective, Apple can sell tens of millions of iPhones in a single quarter. So if Apple truly only has up to 1 million iPhone Ultra units available in Q3, that would create a launch problem instantly. Apple could announce it, but it couldn't actually fulfill demand in a reasonable time frame. Kuo also suggested Apple may be targeting around 10 million total foldable iPhone shipments over the following 12 months. If that's accurate, then the Q3 stock estimate becomes even more critical because it implies the early supply would represent only a small fraction of the planned yearly volume. That's why Kuo warned Apple might push the iPhone Ultra pre-order and release dates into Q4. And if Apple does that, it doesn't just shift the calendar, changes the entire buying experience. A delayed iPhone Ultra release would mean longer waiting times for customers, limited availability in the first wave of countries' potentially restricted storage, and color options at launch, and an immediate scalper market explosion, because anytime you mix new Apple product, category, limited inventory, and high hype, scalpers see an opportunity. And the iPhone Ultra, if it's really Apple's first foldable, would be exactly the kind of device resellers would target. Now here's where the story flips. A new report from China's Cailian Press is directly challenging Kuo's assessment. According to Cailian Press, supply chain sources claim that a September delivery should be no problem, and that they have not heard of any delay. That is a bold statement, because it doesn't sound like sounds like the supply chain expects Apple to stay on schedule, and it gets even more interesting. Cailian Press also claims the iPhone Ultra design has been finalized, and that the companies involved are currently in peak production season. That phrase matters more than people realize. Peak production season suggests the supply chain is already operating at high intensity, meaning the ramp-up is happening now, and the timeline is aligned with Apple's usual iPhone manufacturing cycle. If you're aiming for a September launch, this is exactly what you'd expect to hear around this time of year. Design locked, suppliers active, production in motion. So now the obvious question is, who do we believe? And the reality is, you can't fully believe either side yet, because Apple won't confirm anything until the September iPhone event. Apple doesn't respond to rumors, doesn't comment on production plans, and doesn't clarify delays until it's ready to announce dates publicly. But here's the key point. These reports might not actually be mutually exclusive. There's a scenario where both are correct, depending on how you define launch, because launch can mean different things. Announcement at the Apple event, porters opening first, shipments arriving to customers globally, availability across all regions, or stable inventory where anyone can buy it. Apple could absolutely reveal the iPhone Ultra in September, open pre-orders, and even ship some units while still having the kind of tight supply Quo is warning about. In other words, the iPhone Ultra could launch in September but still feel like a delayed product in real life, because most buyers can't get one until weeks or months later. And that may be the most realistic outcome of all. Think about it. If Apple believes the foldable iPhone Ultra is a major brand moment, something that redefines the iPhone lineup, it may want to show it on stage with the iPhone 18 Pro series no matter what. Apple loves controlling the narrative, and the September event is its biggest hardware stage. Apple doesn't want the headlines to be, Apple's foldable iPhone isn't ready. Apple wants the headlines to be, Apple just entered the foldable era, so Apple could decide to stick to the September reveal, even if the early inventory is limited. Now let's talk about the rumored price, because price changes the entire dynamic. Multiple reports have hinted that the foldable iPhone Ultra could cost anywhere from $2,300 to $2,500. If that sounds insane, remember what Apple is likely building here: a new category iPhone, probably with an advanced hinge, flexible display tech, a premium outer display, flagship cameras, and ultra positioning above Pro Max. At that price, you might assume demand would be limited, but that's not how Apple launches work. Apple's early adopters, collectors, tech enthusiasts, and high-income buyers will absolutely rush this product if it exists. And in many markets, carrier financing makes even expensive phones feel manageable as a monthly payment. So even at $2,500, if supply is limited, it can still sell out instantly. And if it sells out instantly, we get the worst side effect: scalpers. If Apple ships low quantities early on, you can expect resale listings to appear immediately, with markups that could be ridiculous, especially if the foldable iPhone becomes a status symbol in the way the iPhone X once was fun. And that leads to the most important advice for anyone who actually wants to buy the iPhone Ultra: don't reward scalpers. If you miss the first wave, waiting is almost always the smarter move. Apple has a vested interest in ramping supply and restocking quickly, because Apple doesn't want its first foldable iPhone to be defined by scarcity and reseller chaos. Apple wants the iPhone Ultra to be seen as the future of iPhone, a limited sneaker drop. Now let's zoom out and look at why these conflicting reports happen in the first place. Apple's supply chain is massive. There isn't just one factory making the iPhone Ultra. There are multiple suppliers for multiple components: displays, hinges, batteries, chips, camera modules, casings, and each one has its own capacity, yields, and ramp timeline, so it's entirely possible that some parts of the chain are on track, while others are struggling. For example, final design lock could be complete, while hinge yields are still improving. Production could be in peak season, but only for certain components Apple could be assembling. Trial batches, while still limiting launch quantities, could prioritize a few regions first and expand later. That's why one source can say September delivery is no problem, while another warns that actual available units will be too few for a normal release.